Hey guys, today we're going to talk about fraction and decimal conversions. We're going to talk about converting fractions to decimals and then decimals to fractions. So we will start off by talking about converting fractions to decimals and just a review of our fraction parts real quick. We have the number in the top portion of the fraction, which we call the numerator, and then the number in the bottom portion of the fraction, which we call the denominator. And when we want to convert a fraction to a decimal, we are going to divide the numerator by the denominator. So we'll take the 5 in this case and put it inside the division box. We're going to attach a decimal and some zeros after that. We're going to put the 8 on the outside of the division box, and we're going to bring the decimal point straight up. So then we start dividing. How many times does 8 go into 5? Well, 8 doesn't go into 5 evenly. So in this case, we need to look to the next place value. How many times does 8 go into 50? Well, that's 6. 6 times 8 is 48, and we find the difference between 50 and 48, and that is 2. And we drop down to 0. How many times does 8 go into 20, which is twice? 2 times 8 is 16. We find the difference of that, and that is 4. Drop down another 0, and then how many times does 8 go into 40, and that is 5. So 5/8 as a decimal is 0.625. Let's look at some examples. Our first example, we have 4/5. So we're going to put the 4 in the division box and the 5 on the outside, and we're going to attach a 0, a few zeros, and add in that decimal right after the 4. I'm going to bring the decimal up. 5 does not go into 4 evenly, so we put a 0 here, but 5 does go into 40 8 times. 8 times 5 is 40. We subtract and we get 0. So we're done dividing there, and 4/5 as a decimal is 0.8. On the bottom here we have 7/13. So 7 goes inside the division box. We'll attach a decimal and some zeros after that. 13 goes on the outside. So 13 does not go into 7 evenly, but does go into 70 5 times. 13 times 5 is 65. So we find the difference between 70 and 65, and we get 5. And we drop down a 0. So now we see how many times 13 goes into 50. That's 3 times. 3 times 13 is 39. And we subtract and we find a difference of 11. Drop down another 0. And 13 goes into 110 8 times. 8 times 13 is 104. And we find the difference between 110 and 104. We get 6. Drop down another 0. 13 goes into 64 times. That would be 52. We can keep going with this, and we would keep going. We can just keep on attaching zeros here, okay, until the decimal terminates, or we get to where your teacher wants you to round to. And for my students, I want my students to round to the hundredths place, which is right here. Okay, so if we were going to round properly, we'd look to the number to its right, which is an 8. And if we remember our rounding, numbers that are 5 or greater will cause the number to its left to go up 1. Numbers between 0 and 4 will have that number stay the same. So this 3 will now become a 4, and if we were rounding this to the nearest hundredth, this decimal would be 0.54. Okay, so before we talk about converting decimals to fractions, let's review some place value information, because place value is going to be extremely important for us in determining what the decimal is as a fraction. Okay, so here's our decimal, and to the left of the decimal are the ones and tens, and the hundreds and the thousands and the 10,000s, and I didn't write all of those out. But to the right here, remember we have our tenths is the place right next to the decimal point, and then 2 away is the hundredths, okay? And then we have the thousandths, the 10,000ths, the 100,000ths, and again, we could keep going with our places. But just as a quick review, I just put these few up here, okay? So when we're making a decimal a fraction, the first thing to do is to determine which place the number terminates in, okay? So with our example here, we have 0.156. The 6 is where the number terminates or ends, if you're not familiar with that term. Terminate means to end. So the 6 is in the thousandths place, okay? Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. And that number of the place value is what goes in the denominator. So again, this ends in the thousandths. We're going to put 1,000 in the denominator. We're then going to remove the decimal and place the number in the numerator. So we're going to get rid of the point here, the decimal point, and place 156 in the numerator. And then, if we can, we simplify. In this case, 156 over 1,000. Both of those are divisible by 4. And so, as a simplified fraction, we get 39 over 250. All right, so some examples with this. We have 0.3, and that terminates in the tenths column, or the tenths place. So the tenths, or a 10, is what's going to be in our denominator, and we take the 3, put it in our numerator. That fraction cannot be simplified, and 3/10 is a final result. With the next one, we have 0.17. Okay, the 7 is in the hundredths place, so 100 is what's going to go in the denominator. We then remove the decimal point and put the 17 in the numerator, and we have 17 over 100. Again, that that fraction cannot be simplified, and so 17 over 100 is the result. The one on the bottom here, we have 0.2571, and that terminates in the 10,000ths place. So we're going to put 10,000 in the denominator here. We're going to remove the decimal point and put 2571 in the numerator. And again, that is a fraction that cannot be simplified. And so 2571 over 10,000 is our final result there. Sometimes we have zeros before our significant numbers terminate. In this case, again, you still find where the decimal terminates, where the last significant number is in that decimal number. So here, again, we end up in the hundredths place, even though there's a 0 before it. It still terminates in the hundredths place. So 100 is going to go in the denominator, and then we will remove the decimal point and take that 3 and put it in the numerator. You could put 0.3 if you like, that's fine, but a final result for that one would be 3/100. Sometimes we have decimal numbers with whole numbers. Okay? In that case, we're just going to bring them down. We don't need to work with the whole numbers right now, because we're really only concerned about making this decimal into a fraction. Okay, so we know a whole number is always going to remain a whole number, so we can just kind of bring that down. So in this case, we have 0.56. That's what we're going to work with. The 6 is in the hundredths place here. So we put that 56 over 100 and bring down the 1, so we have 1/56 over 100, and we can reduce the fraction. Okay, again, 56 and 100 are both divisible by 4. So a final result here would be 1/14 over 25. Okay, folks, we will get some practice with this in class, and we will see you there. Woosah.